when we heed a certain call.
Before streaming, before playlists, before algorithms decided what you heard, there were songs so powerful they didn't just top charts. They became the charts. The best-selling R&B records ever pressed to vinyl. Ever broadcast over AM radio. Ever played at a house party nobody wanted to leave. And one song at the very top of this list changed the music industry forever. Stay with us because number 1 is going to hit different. Number 10, What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, 1971. Nobody in 1971 expected Motown to let this record breathe. The label sat on it for months, didn't want to release it. Berry Gordy himself called it uncommercial. Thought it was too political, too unconventional, too far outside the Motown formula that had been printing money for over a decade. But Marvin Gaye had reached a point in his life where the formula wasn't enough anymore. His brother Frankie had come back from Vietnam broken and changed. The streets of Detroit were still scarred from the 1967 riots. And Marvin was watching all of it, absorbing it and refusing to look away. He demanded the record be released. He threatened to never record for Motown again if they kept it shelved. And when the world finally heard it, it obliterated every expectation anyone had about what R&B could be. What's Going On wasn't just a song, it was a conversation between an artist and a nation in crisis. Vietnam, poverty, racial tension, environmental destruction. All of it wrapped in the most silky, orchestrated, emotionally layered soul production ever committed to tape up to that point. The strings didn't soar, they ached. The rhythm didn't drive, it swayed. Don't punish me. And Marvin's voice floated above all of it, like a man who had seen too much and was still somehow choosing love over anger. It sold over 2 million copies in its first year. The album became the best-selling soul LP of 1971. Critics who initially dismissed it spent the next 5 decades calling it the greatest album ever made, in any genre. What makes this entry so staggering is that it almost didn't exist. If Motown had won that argument, the entire landscape of 70s soul music would have sounded completely different. That is the weight of number 10, and we are just getting started. You can see what's going on. Number 9, My Girl by The Temptations, 1964. When Smokey Robinson sat down and wrote this song, he had one person in mind, his wife Claudette. But when he handed it to The Temptations, something happened that even he didn't fully anticipate. The song stopped being about one woman and started being about every woman that every man had ever loved and struggled to find the words for. That's the alchemy of great songwriting. And My Girl is one of the purest examples in the entire history of recorded music. Released in late 1964 and hitting number 1 by February of 1965, it became the first Temptations single to top the Billboard Hot 100. But the R&B sales figures told a story that the pop chart couldn't fully capture. This record moved through black communities like a current in barbershops, on front porches, or through open apartment windows on warm evenings. It wasn't just purchased, it was adopted. David Ruffin's lead vocal was the engine of all of it, warm, aching, effortlessly conversational. Like he was telling you something personal over a kitchen table rather than performing for a microphone. The production, built on that immortal guitar intro and James Jamison's incomparable bass work, felt like sunshine translated into sound. Motown's distribution network could barely keep pace with demand. Record stores were reordering before the first shipment had sold through. Decades later, My Girl was certified multi-platinum based on historical sales recalculations. And it remains one of the most licensed songs in the history of advertising and film. It showed up in movies, television specials, commercials, and wedding playlists for 60 consecutive years. That kind of longevity doesn't happen by accident. It happens when a song tells the truth so perfectly that time has no power over it. That's number 9, and number 8 is going to stop you cold.
Quick question, are you subscribed? If not, you're part of the 99% who watch and disappear. Here's the problem, YouTube won't show you our next video unless you subscribe. So if you want more untold music stories like this, hit that button right now, 2 seconds, do it before you forget.
Number 8, I Will Always Love You by Whitney Houston, 1992. Originally written and recorded by Dolly Parton, 1973.
But above all this, I wish you.
This entry requires a moment of context, because the full story is what makes the commercial achievement even more extraordinary.
Love.
Dolly Parton wrote this song in 1973 as a farewell to her mentor and business partner, Porter Wagoner, when she decided to strike out on her own. It was a country record. It charted in the country world. It was beautiful and emotionally honest in the way that all great Dolly Parton songs are. And for nearly 2 decades, that's what it was, a beloved country classic. Then came Whitney Houston. Then came The Bodyguard.
Yes,
And then came what can only be described as one of the most seismic commercial events in the history of popular music. Whitney's 1992 recording didn't just cover the song, and it reinvented it as a cathedral. That opening a cappella moment, her voice alone, no instrumentation, no safety net, is arguably the single greatest vocal entrance ever recorded. The way the production slowly builds underneath her, the way the arrangement breathes and expands. And then the key change timed like a precision instrument, landing exactly where your emotions have been building without your permission. The record sold over 20 million copies worldwide. It became the best-selling physical single by a woman in recorded history.
you have all you dreamed of.
The R&B and soul market alone accounted for a staggering share of those numbers. It sat at number 1 for 14 consecutive weeks.
And I wish you
Dolly Parton reportedly cried when she heard it and then cried again when she saw the royalty checks because she had kept the publishing rights. Two artists, two eras, on one song, and a commercial legacy that neither the pop chart nor the R&B chart had ever seen at that scale before. Number 7 is a different kind of power entirely.
But above all this,
Number 7, Respect, by Aretha Franklin, 1967. Otis Redding wrote this song, recorded it. Released it in 1965 as a plea from a man to his woman, "Give me what I need when I come home, because I'm out here grinding for you." It was a good record, a solid, punchy R&B record that charted respectably. And then Aretha Franklin took it, flipped the perspective entirely, turned a man's request into a woman's demand. And in doing so, created what many historians consider the most culturally significant 3 minutes and 28 seconds ever pressed to vinyl.
yes, I do.
Respect hit number 1 on both the pop and R&B charts simultaneously in the summer of 1967. It sold over 1 million copies in a matter of weeks, but the sales figures almost feel beside the point when you consider what the record became.
Wherever I go,
It arrived at a moment when America was fracturing. The civil rights movement was reaching a fever pitch.
all over the world, I need respect.
The women's liberation movement was finding its voice, and Black Americans were demanding to be seen and heard in ways the country had spent centuries refusing.
Just a little bit. To the E-S-P-E-C-T.
And here was Aretha Franklin spelling it out. Literally, R-E-S-P-E-C-T.
Find out what it means to me. To the E-S-P-E-C-T.
Find out what it means to me. The clarity of that demand, the unapologetic joy in the delivery.
Take it to see.
The horns punching like exclamation marks. Otis Redding himself heard the finished record and told people she had completely taken his song. He meant every word of it as the highest possible compliment. Aretha won 2 Grammy Awards. She was crowned the Queen of Soul, not by a committee or a marketing department,
Just to give me my purpose when you move.
but by the unanimous consent of a listening public that had just witnessed something unprecedented. The commercial numbers were massive. The cultural numbers were immeasurable. Number 6 put 2 legends in the same room, and the result was history. Number 6, Endless Love by Diana Ross and Lionel Richie, 1981.
You will always be.
Think about what it means to put Diana Ross and Lionel Richie on the same record. By 1981, Diana Ross had spent nearly 2 decades as one of the most commercially successful artists in the history of Motown, the face of the Supremes.
Your every breath that I take.
A solo career studded with number 1s, a film career that earned her an Academy Award nomination.
Your every step I make.
And Lionel Richie had just separated from the Commodores and was in the process of establishing himself as one of the defining solo voices of the new decade.
No, I don't mind.
2 forces of nature, 1 song, 1 movie. Endless Love was written and recorded quickly. The film needed a title track. The deadline was tight.
I want to share all my love
And the session came together with a speed that belied the enormous impact it would have.
with you.
It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1981 and stayed there for 9 weeks. 9 weeks.
No one else will.
In a summer full of major releases from major artists, this duet simply refused to move.
And you're
The R&B chart told the same story. It crossed every demographic boundary that R&B music had historically faced, pulling listeners from pop, adult contemporary, and soul audiences simultaneously. It became the best-selling single either artist had released as a duet to that point. It was certified platinum almost immediately and continued accumulating sales deep into the decade and beyond. What's remarkable and what makes this entry so fascinating is the paradox at its center. A record made quickly, under deadline pressure, for a film soundtrack, outperformed records that artists had labored over for months or years. And sometimes greatness doesn't require time. Sometimes it just requires two voices that were always supposed to find each other. That's number 6. And number 5 is going to make you understand why one man dominated this entire era.
I'll be that.
Number 5, Let's Get It On by Marvin Gaye, 1973.
Since we
Marvin Gaye appears on this list more than once. By the end of this countdown, you'll understand exactly why. Because the man's commercial dominance during the 1970s was simply without parallel in the R&B world. But Let's Get It On deserves its own conversation, because what it achieved commercially was inseparable from what it achieved atmospherically. This was not a song that asked for your attention, it assumed it. From the very first moment the needle hit the groove, you were already inside it. Released in the summer of 1973, the record spent 3 weeks at the top of the Billboard Hot 100, while simultaneously ruling the R&B charts. It sold over 2 million copies in the United States alone, at a time when 2 million was a number that didn't just define a hit, it redefined a career. The production was unlike anything else in the charts that summer. Where most soul records of the era pushed and drove and urged you forward, this one leaned back. The bass sat low and deliberate. The guitars were soft and unhurried. The horns whispered instead of shouted. And Marvin's vocal had a quality that was almost impossible to manufacture, a lived-in, world-weary, deeply human warmth that made you feel like he had been carrying this feeling his entire life and was only now getting around to telling you about it. Music historians cite Let's Get It On as the moment R&B fully matured into an adult genre. The moment the music stopped speaking to teenagers at sock hops and started speaking to grown people who had loved and lost and were still willing to love again.
You said, Marvin, baby, this evening. You said
2 million copies, a cultural redefinition. And this is only number 5.
sugar, you promised me.
What's above it is going to remind you why this era of music was unlike anything before or since. Number 4, I Heard It Through the Grapevine by Marvin Gaye, 1968. 3 entries on this countdown, 3 entries for the same artist. If that doesn't tell you everything you need to know about Marvin Gaye's commercial dominance, the sales figures will finish the argument. I Heard It Through the Grapevine became the best-selling Motown single of the entire 1960s. It moved 4 million copies globally within its first year of release. 4 million records in 1968, with no internet, no streaming, no music video, no social media. Pure radio spins, word of mouth, and the undeniable gravitational pull of one of the greatest opening bass lines ever constructed. Here's what makes the history even richer. Motown had actually recorded a different version of this song by Gladys Knight and the Pips and released it first. And that version was excellent. It charted well. And then Motown went back into the vault and pulled out Marvin's recording, which had been sitting shelved for over a year, and released it as a follow-up. What happened next was unprecedented. Marvin's version didn't just outperform the Gladys Knight version, it swallowed it. It swallowed everything on the chart. It spent 7 consecutive weeks at #1 and reset the commercial ceiling for what a Motown single could achieve. The reason is Marvin's vocal. The paranoia and heartbreak in his delivery weren't performed, they were transmitted. There's a rawness in the way he phrases every line that makes you feel complicit in whatever betrayal he's describing. You're not just listening to a man who found out his woman was leaving him. You're living inside that discovery with him. That level of emotional authenticity is what turns a hit record into a generational touchstone. We're in the top 3 now. Brace yourself, because number 3 changed what an instrument was allowed to be. Number 3, Superstition by Stevie Wonder, 1972. The clavinet. Before Superstition, the clavinet was a keyboard instrument that existed mostly in the background of other people's records, a texture, an accent, a supporting player. Stevie Wonder picked it up, wrote one of the most propulsive funk soul riffs in the history of popular music, and turned it into the lead voice of a #1 record. In doing so, he didn't just make a hit, he changed what the instrument meant forever. Every musician who has touched a clavinet since 1972 has done so in the shadow of those 16 notes. Yet Superstition was released in late 1972 and hit #1 on both the pop and R&B charts, simultaneously Stevie's first chart topper in several years, and the beginning of what most critics consider the greatest sustained creative run in the history of popular music. It was also the first record released under Stevie's landmark New Deal with Motown, in which he negotiated complete creative control over his music, his production, and his publishing. That deal was historic, and Superstition was the document that proved he had been right to demand it. Commercially, the record was enormous on release, and has never stopped being enormous. Its presence in film soundtracks, television series, live performances, and advertising campaigns has kept it commercially active for over 50 years. The drum groove alone has been sampled, Ash interpolated and imitated hundreds of times. The horn arrangement is a masterclass in how brass can function as rhythm rather than melody. And Stevie's vocal, playful, urgent, slightly menacing rides the whole thing, with the casual confidence of a man who already knows he's made something timeless. That's number 3. Number 2 sold more copies than almost anything that had come before it. And number 1 did something no record had ever done. Number 2, I'll Be There by the Jackson 5, 1970. By October of 1970, the Jackson 5 had already released 3 consecutive #1 singles. I Want You Back, ABC, The Love You Save.
Just call my name.
3 in a row, a feat that had never been accomplished by a debut act in the history of the Billboard Hot 100.
And I'll be there.
The music world was watching to see if the 4th single could possibly continue what was starting to feel less like a hot streak and more like a supernatural occurrence.
Just call my name.
I'll Be There didn't just continue it, it exceeded everything that had come before. The song was softer than its predecessors, more tender. Where the earlier hits had been kinetic and jubilant and almost irresistibly danceable, I'll Be There slowed everything down and asked something different of its listeners. It asked them to feel something quiet and serious, and they responded in extraordinary numbers.
If you should ever find someone
It moved over 2 million copies in the United States within weeks of release,
new, I know he better
becoming at that time the best-selling Motown single ever recorded, surpassing even Grapevine.
be good to you.
It spent 5 weeks at #1 and became the capstone of one of the most remarkable commercial runs in the history of popular music.
'Cause if he doesn't,
But the reason this record sits this high isn't just the sales, it's Michael.
whenever you need me,
13 years old, standing at that microphone and delivering a vocal performance of such emotional intelligence, such tenderness and vulnerability,
I'll be there.
that veteran musicians in the room reportedly couldn't believe what they were hearing.
'Cause if he doesn't,
There was nothing precocious or performed about it. He wasn't a child trying to sound adult,
I'll be there.
and he was simply someone who understood the song completely and communicated it completely.
Don't you know, baby, yeah,
Quintuple platinum on cumulative sales, one of the best-selling singles in Motown history.
I'll be there.
And this is only number 2. So what could possibly be sitting at the top of this list? You know the answer, but you need to hear the full story.
I'll be there.
Number 1, We Are the World by USA for Africa, 1985.
Well, send him your heart.
January 28, 1985, the night of the American Music Awards in Los Angeles.
So they know that someone cares. And that
45 of the biggest names in music told only that they were needed for something important, told to leave their egos at the door,
life will be stronger and free.
told that a sign at the studio entrance would read, "Check your ego here,"
But if you just believe, there's nowhere we can find.
walked into A&M recording studios and made the most commercially successful ensemble recording in the history of popular music. We Are the World was written by Michael Jackson and Lionel Richie,
And the truth, you know love is all we.
produced by Quincy Jones, who was so committed to the efficiency of the session that he posted that sign himself. It was recorded in a single overnight session, beginning after midnight and finishing as dawn broke over Hollywood. The artists in that room represented virtually every corner of the American music landscape, but the soul and R&B community was its backbone.
We are the one to make a brighter day.
Ray Charles, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross, Tina Turner, James Ingram, Billy Ocean, Smokey Robinson, Dionne Warwick.
There's a choice we're making. We're
The voice of Black American music assembled in one room for one purpose:
saving our our lives. It's true, we make
It was released in March of 1985 and became the fastest-selling American pop single in history at that time.
a better day, just you and me.
Over 20 million copies worldwide. In the United States, it raised over $60 million for African famine relief, a humanitarian achievement that no single piece of music had ever approached before or since. It debuted at #1 in virtually every charting country simultaneously. Radio stations around the world agreed to play it at the same moment, on the same day, a coordinated global event that had never been attempted for a musical release.
We'll be stronger and free.
The commercial numbers are staggering. The humanitarian impact is staggering.
As God has shown us.
But what sits at the center of this record, what makes it the #1 best-selling R&B rooted record ever made, is that it happened in one night.
By turning stone to bread.
45 human beings, one room, one night. And the result was a record that moved 20 million people to spend money, not for themselves, not for entertainment, but for strangers on the other side of the world. That is what soul music was always capable of. That is what these voices built in the church pews and the barbershops and the late-night recording studios of Black America were always pointing toward. That's #1. That's the power of soul, and that is the legacy of the music that built the world's soundtrack.
Be